following on the screen, you're welcome to do so. The mural link is in the meeting invite. If we put it up in the chat, you have to, it scrolls down all the time. So, but you're welcome to follow along in your own version as well if you follow the link in your meeting invite, or we'll just share the screen.
Yes. Okay. All right, so I have my chat up, I have you fine looking people in front of me, and I have our sprint board. So welcome back. It's going to have a similar flavor to our previous product sprint reviews that we've had in the past. We're just going to confirm what our goals were for sprint 3 and what we managed to achieve in a 2-week period. We're going to show you some of the wireframes that the UI UX team have been working through. We're going to give you a product demo and talk about what's coming up for sprint 4. So I'm just going to quickly recap on, if you weren't able to make it for the last product reviews, what we've been up to. So here we had our sprint 0. So that was really us kind of rebooting the project, new project team, new technology, brand new backlog, new approaches to working together. All of that information is in the same mural board at the top. So if you look through, you'll be able to see all of our sprints here. In sprint 1, wow, there's some spelling errors. That's part of what we're here for, guys. Matt authenticates with BC Services card. He creates a StudentAid BC account, and he's able to update that information on the SABC account and its services card. Last week, he was able to initiate a financial assistance application and provide his personal information. So I'm going to pass the mic over to Matt, and she can, to Elise rather, and she can remind us about who Matt is, talk about sprint 3 goals, and some biz context to kind of help level set the room.
Thanks, Michelle. So just a reminder for folks, I talked about this last time, but we're continuing to build our application in layers. And so we're using different personas to allow us to build that layer. So right now we're working with Matt. As you can see on his little card, he is 35 years young. He is not married and he doesn't have kids. He's in his first year at Sprott Shaw, and he's a new applicant to our program. He does have a permanent disability. And so we are going to build out the application and answer the questions, as well as show you the demonstration as if we were Matt. And that matters because sometimes we're not going to go down a certain path. So for example, last time we showed you that when he said, no, I don't have any dependents, there was no follow-up question. But in a future persona, maybe Jessica or some of our other folks that have kids, they're going to say, yes, I have dependents. And that's going to open up another layer of the application because we want them to tell us about their dependents. So we're going to continue using Matt. You're going to see us sign in as Matt, and we're going to answer our questions as if we're Matt. So just wanted to flag for you that Matt is kind of our, let's call it our happy path. He's our fairly easy persona in that he doesn't have a spouse, he doesn't have parents that are contributing financially, but he does have a permanent disability. And so this has opened the door for us to be doing some work with @BC. So you'll hear Andrew talk a little bit about that in the future. But I want to flag for you that it means that we're starting to have some really interesting conversations about the Appendix 8. And do we even need an Appendix 8? I'm going to stop there for emphasis. Crazy talk, but this is what we're talking about. Do we even need this? What does this change mean? And so starting to have some of those conversations with the business. So definitely look forward to your input as we get further along and we can show you the outcome of some of those conversations. In a future state, don't know which sprint yet, but in a future state, we're also going to use some other personas. But we've also created some personas for institution users, and we've been validating those with our institution advisory group. So you're going to meet Zoe today, and Zoe is another one of our personas. Couple of reminders before we go into the demo and we get too far, especially for folks that this is maybe their first demo that they've had a chance to come to. We certainly hope that you come every other week, but if you're not able to, we record them, as you know, so we can pop it in the VHS. You know, I'm dating myself there. But just a reminder that there's a couple things. One, our application is now chunked into 4 parts, for lack of a better word. Last sprint, we showed you the personal information part of the application, and today we're going to show you 3 other parts of that application. Pardon me. We're going to show you the program and institution part. We're going to show you the financial information collection part, and we're going to show you that final part, which is really what we would call the declaration, or confirming that the information is accurate. That's all we've done so far. We haven't submitted an application yet. And you're also going to see that some of the questions on the applications that we show you today, they're not perfect yet. We haven't tweaked them. We haven't made sure that they're exactly worded the way we want them. They may not be lined up perfectly. It's not pretty. We're not done that yet. So please just kind of let go of some of those things if you want to comment on our spelling or on our spacing. We know we're not done that yet, so just want to flag that for you. So I think I've covered off most of what we've done in Sprint 3. So program information, financial information, which will get us all the way through to that confirmation, but we haven't built that yet. And then, of course, behind the scenes, the dev team and other folks have been working on some of the technical stuff. So we need to get that rules engine set up so that we can start to actually assess this application. There's some behind the scenes that they've been working on, working with assistive technology. Sorry, our @BC folks. So you'll hear us refer to that. And some other technical stuff, which I'm going to let Andrew speak to when he's going to talk about a few different things. From a user experience stuff, Roop and Lynn, and unfortunately Katie has gone back to her position, but we're excited to welcome Courtney back to the fold. So starting to work on some of those logins and really starting to think about what will some of those screens actually look like. Right now, we've got some placeholders in there, but really starting to think about what are those screens going to look like and how do we flow between the screens. So that's what we've been working on, and that's what we're excited to show you. I did want to take a couple, so actually before we go forward, just any questions about that, or? We will have questions at the end if you want to talk specifics, but.
We have a question in the chat, Elise.
Okay. Sorry, just trying to pull it up.
Is there a question?
Personal identity and other personal information. I'm not sure what the question is. Irina, could you maybe clarify that?
Yeah, not the question, but rather clarifying the distinction between program information, personal information. When we talk about personal information, we mean personal identity information.
Yes.
And other information are also personal, but they're not directly identifiable.
Right.
Thank you. Yeah, spoken like a true privacy and security person. Yes, thank you. Yeah, good point. Good point. So I did want to flag quickly just a little bit to remind people about the strategic opportunities. You probably have heard a lot of conversation about a lot of different projects that are happening, often referred to as mini projects. And we've got a lot of plates spinning, lots of little different things going on. Some of them are little, some of them are not so little. But I just wanted to flag that when we started this project, we said, look, we can change everything. We could build all kinds of amazing things, but then we're not going to meet our timelines. And we may not be ready, nor will some of our stakeholders be ready to adopt all of those changes. So we need to figure out where can we focus our time and effort? What's the biggest bang for our buck? So as a team, a leadership team, and in consultation with lots of folks, we identified 8 strategic opportunities where we said, look, for the most part, we're going to take what we do now and build it into the new system. You know, there may be some other adjustments, there may be some changes because of just a new modern system will force us to make some changes, but we're not going to boil this ocean. We're not going to do that. But we did identify these 8 opportunities where we said we want to go into this with our eyes wide open and consciously make a change. And so we've identified a series of projects, and we're moving towards making some business decisions about what we're going to do in these 8 areas. I'm not going to spend a whole bunch of time this morning because today is about showing you what we've built, but I want to let you know that we're going to schedule some time and have some other opportunities for us to bring everyone up to speed on what have we done, because we're moving towards making some decisions in these opportunities, and we want to make sure that you as a branch know what are our decisions and have a chance to contribute to that conversation and understand what's the impact of that decision on you. So I just want to flag that for you. So those are coming, not today, but we'll have some more conversation about that. And if you want to have some more conversation about that today, maybe at the end of our meeting today, I'm happy to stay and spend some time, or we can schedule some time to talk a little bit more about that. But just a reminder that we can't fix everything as we go into the new system. We're going to try to focus on building what we have now in a modern platform with some key changes, and these are the key changes that we're looking at making. So with that caveat, let's move on. I think I'm going to pass it over to, I'm not sure if it's Roop, I think.
Sorry, I was on mute. Yes, Roop. Roop
right.
is going to take over. You've provided us with some in-progress draft wireframes. I'll let you take it over.
So what I wanted to do today was, in our last session, what I did was I shared the workflow we created for the students who are going to be going through and looking at. Oh, that's a little bit low res. Can I?
Yeah.
Hang on one sec.
You can take over.
Okay, I'll just share one sec. So yeah, what I did last time is I shared the workflow of a student going in and creating or filling out their application. So in the case of Matt here, I just wanted to kind of go through and show what that looks like, going from kind of a workflow to a wireframe that's kind of an in-between state, where I wanted to share a little bit about how we're doing our wireframing and how we're standing on the shoulders of the work that's been done in the past in codename Iggy, which is kind of the prototypes that have been created in the previous iteration of this. And so what I've done is I've taken all of the graphical elements from that and brought a lot of those over into this. And then we're just kind of, what's the word? We're evolving it a little bit more to bring it to this current world of an MVP that makes sense for the developers working on the current scope of things. So anyways, everything's been broken up into the sections you see here. A nice little welcome screen that gives the student a little bit of information about what they're going to need to get this process going. Next is in the personal information section. Again, we talked about transparency and making sure if there are any deal breakers for them, they're aware of them. But as you can see here that we've put those questions like bankruptcy and citizenship up front. So if they do answer answer this in a way that means they probably won't receive funding, we're going to let them know. We won't stop them, but we're going to let them know that heads up, this might be a problem. Things like their date of high school attendance, their relationship status, their job status, their Aboriginal status, their PD status, youth and care status, and things like of that sort. Finally, down here, there's a section that we're going to be adding soon. If you see anything that's grayed out, it's just because it's not in current scope. And so I just wanted to show where it would live, but not necessarily go into detail on that for the developers. But yeah, so as you work through, you'll notice up here that you get a checkbox to denote that you've done it. So you know that section is complete. Down here again, we're thinking about maybe showing an estimated the estimated educational cost comes from the institution, so that's fine. But maybe potentially the reward amount would be estimated for them as well. Maybe. Down here in the financial section, same idea. It's how do we deal with these forms? It's going to be a question that comes up again and again, and it does often come up in government, is how do we deal with forms in a way that isn't cumbersome? And so what we've done here is, if you answer, say yes, as an example here, you would see this section here. So what we're doing is minimizing the amount of things that they see visually until they need to see them. And that just helps cut down and kind of that cognitive load that people feel when they look at this big daunting form in front of them. And then finally, on that last screen, to confirm your submission, we're also going to be showing maybe some read-only content in the view that would look similar to the application detail view. I'll show that real quickly just at the end here. But yeah, down here, maybe it's a thank you, maybe it's the estimated reward, and then an option to go right back home. Another thing on this screen is we're going to add in is if, say, they are a dependent and they need parental information, then we'll show that here that, you know, in the relevant section, you'll be adding that in there. But also here, we'll say the next steps are we'll receive the information from your parents or whatever it might be. And that's how we work from the workflow diagram right through to wireframe / somewhere in between final mock-up stages, because we're working on that design system in the background at the same time. Any questions on that?
There's a question in the chat. Elise,
Yep.
I'm not sure if you want to handle that one.
Sorry, I'm just.
Stuart has a question about selecting a program. Will they have the option to select full or part-time?
Great question. I love that question.
That's a really good question. So the answer is no right now. So we're moving towards a place where we have an integrated application, right? We are aligning the part-time and the full-time, which is one of the principles of this project. And so we need to figure out how we're going to manage some of that. And so what you're going to see today, we'll jump into the demo to show you that part of it. What you're seeing today is a kind of a light version of program, but there's a pretty big project that is underway right now to look at how do we manage program, which is currently very closely connected to delivery dates and also to course load. And so there's some work being done led by Haley and supported by Neve to really start to look at perhaps separating that out a little bit more. And then how do we make sure that we know whether or not the student is in for part-time or full-time, and then apply the appropriate rules. So we're going to get there, but you have caught on one of the big changes is that you will notice so far that the student has not started by saying, I'm applying for part-time, and then they're presented with a set of questions, or I'm applying for full-time and they're presented with different questions. We are trying as much as possible to integrate that experience for the student, and based on the answers to our questions, that will tell us whether they are part-time or full-time, and therefore what assessment rules to apply.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate, yeah, I understand that the copy paste of the Figma drawings are blurry. That's okay. They're still very, very drafty. And so I don't want people to get bogged down in the details. We just wanted to give you a high level overview of where we're headed. The purposes of today's show and tell is the actual product that has been built. And that is the appropriate place to give feedback on the actual built product. Unless you're a part of those UI sessions with the UI team and the BAs. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay.
I just want to flag, there's another question in the chat. So what happens if the student needs to change some of the information after the application is submitted? So very good question. At this point, we are absolutely planning to support students, what we call editing their application after it has been submitted, And of course, that would trigger a reassessment and a new notice of assessment. So, and of course, we will need to keep a record of that as well. So our plan is to enable that functionality. You're not going to see that today because we haven't gotten that far along, but that is our plan.
Awesome.
So without further ado, I think we're actually
Yes.
going to show you the demo. Yay.
Yes, yay, here we go. So today we're going to see Matt continue on his financial aid application journey. So now he's going to provide institution information, and I just want to highlight the fact that because we don't have institution accounts set up yet, we've had to hard code that information as a placeholder in the meantime until we have that information in. Same with education programs. It will be hard coded for nursing. They're going to be able to add their program start and end date, personal income, last year's tax return. They provide their consent to share and validate income with CRA, travel costs, living situation costs, and he will be able to log off. So I'm actually going to pass the screen and mic over to Sandeep, who's one of our developers, and he's going to show us the work that has been done.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Michelle. I am going to share the screen and take you through the journey of whatever has been built. And we've tried to make it as close to possible as those drafty Figma, but that just give you an idea of the flow. So I'm going to share my screen, which. OK, so we are on the test environment for this demo, and we are on the StudentAid page. I'm going to click login. We are going to go for virtual card testing because these are all, BC services card that we have created for our own testing purposes. And this time we've got a user made format. So I'm going to be using that particular user, which is. Give me 1 second to get that. Yeah. OK.
Drum roll.
So this is Matt signing in using his BC services card.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm just trying to find out Matt's. Yeah, here we go. I have it. That's a serial number. There's passcode here now. And this will now try and fetch information from the BC services card. And that information will be ported over to the StudentAid application. It shows us that this is the information that we are going to get. And Matt hits continue. OK, so he lands on the student profile page where he gets a chance to look at all the information in a read-only mode. This shows that it has actually come from BC services card. And because this is a new user for us, I'm going to go ahead and fill all the information so that we have a record of it in our database as well. So I'll put in a.
So folks will recall that this is what we demonstrated last week. So this is just a refresher for you. So Matt is a new applicant. He's coming in for the first time, and so he is setting up his account by providing the additional required information for him to have an account. You're noticing that Sandeep has conveniently shown us one of the cool features, which is that if Matt tries to enter a social insurance number that is not in a valid format, we have a validation on there so that he can't enter 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. It needs to be in a valid format.
So thanks for taking my thunder away, Elise. So
sorry, I was trying to fill your time spot.
I'll repeat the exact same thing. So if I hit 1, you see that SIN number is an invalid format. I do 1, 2, 3, it's the same thing. So I'm going to put a fake valid SIN for now. 377 052 and a phone number. These are right now just free field texts. So Victoria, BC, Canada, 4L.
So there's just a question from David and Neve. I haven't forgotten your question. We're going to come back to that for sure. But there's a question about the BC services card. So we'll just need to do a double check to confirm, because yeah, it should say gender, not sex. It's a good catch. Thank you, David. Yep, does gender there. Sex equals male. Okay. Does that make sense? David, does that address your concern, or was there? Okay, good. We're good. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to hit
No,
save.
it was on the previous screen.
Oh, it was on the previous screen. Okay. All right. We'll make a note and come back to that.
That's BC Service card.
Yeah, so that screen I think is the confirmation screen that comes through from BC Services card. So that's how they have it labeled in their system. So I would say like we'll go with whichever makes the most sense, and then just let them know that they need to update it.
Yeah, we can give them that feedback.
Okay,
Good.
so I'm going to hit save here, which will now save this record into the applications database. And there you go, student was successfully created. Now that the information is there with the database, Matt can now start the application. Matt clicks on start application. We get this lady who welcomes him and tells him that you will have to have these information ready in order to begin your application. So Matt can click on begin your personal information, and right on the top we have this kind of step through for him to go through section by section. He can on the first section, personal information, he can confirm all the information again. If the information is incorrect, he goes here and corrects it, which is going to be the read-only page. And he can correct any information here. And okay, second. Yeah. So I'm back on the personal information here. I confirm. He says I'm confirming it. First question. Are you a BC resident? Basically, you must meet the on my first day of the class. I will be a Canadian citizen. I have lived BC for at least 12 consecutive months without being a full-time post-secondary student. He says yes. Student SABC requires that applicant not be having previously declared bankruptcy. So that is a question. He says no. Date of high school attendance. So what date do I put there, guys? Could you just give me a help here?
He's 35, so let's choose 2004, June 2004.
Okay. June 2004. Relationship status. We know that Matt is single. Will you be working full-time, 32 hours a week during half of your study period?
No.
No.
Okay, he won't be. Okay. He is not an Aboriginal.
Nope.
And I'm a current youth in care. He is not a person in care. He does have a permanent disability.
Mm-hmm.
Please specify he doesn't have any dependents. So from here.
So folks, you've seen all of this from last time. So now we're moving into the new stuff.
Yeah, but what they have not seen is the click of next section.
Yes,
I guess.
very exciting.
Yeah,
Click.
so here you go, 1, 2, 3. And he goes to the select program section. Here, he gets a chance to mention what school will he be attending right now. As it was explained earlier, all of this information is hard-coded, so it's not coming out from the institutions or school. We've hard-coded in the system.
Right
I'm going
now,
to go for,
in a future
right
state, it'll be a much bigger list, but for now we're just hard coding it.
Yeah. So he says Sprott College, and he's going to go for nursing program. Start date. Some help, please.
September 4th, 2021.
Saturday. Oof.
Sure. Oh, that's Bradshaw, and he's going to end December 17th,
of
2021.
Yeah.
Ooh, that's a Friday.
Yeah, and then again, next section.
So I just want to flag for a second that obviously we will need to collect more program information, but as I mentioned, there's that project that's being worked on. So for right now, we're just collecting enough to continue to move forward. So in a future sprint, we'll show you that, and that's going to be more fleshed out. So that is not the only information we're going to collect, but it's just enough for now, and there'll be more information once that project has finished and we've made some business decisions.
Right. So because he's a student, he doesn't have any income at the moment, and this section prompts you that if you did not file a 2020 tax return, enter your total income from all sources inside and outside of Canada. So we're going to go for a 0. And you see a nice $sign here. Took us a while to get that. Okay. Okay. Next section is the consent that he's providing to the Canada Revenue Agency. I hereby consent to the ministry so that they can use the income tax information. You can click on read more. This is a bigger section with a lot of text. So we have successfully been able to collapse it and uncollapse it by giving you a read more link. There you go. It's a lot of text. I'll send you all a screenshot of it. Please read it. Then this is the consent where he actually provides the consent. He clicks on checkbox. This is a section where he provides information about his living situation and the travel cost. So whether or not he's going to be living with his parents or guardians. If he says yes, nothing happens. But for him, he's going to say no. Another question is asked, will you be then relocating to a city to attend school and returning home at least once during the study period? If he says yes, he is going to be then mentioning the cost of the return trip home. So I'll go with a fictitious number here to say $500. And next section. This is still under construction, and this basically completes the work that we have done. I'm going to show an extra bonus feature here that we were able to get. This is a nice log off button. So if you click on the log off button, it logs you back to the main screen where you're asked to log in again. And if someone tries to get into the application again using student profile, he gets back here. So
they have to log back in using their credentials.
Exactly. And that is it.
Great. Thank you so much, Sandeep. There's been a few questions that have popped up in the chat area, so I'm going to go back and start to answer some of those questions. And if you have other questions, please type them in, or once we get closer to the bottom of the chat, maybe put your hand up, and then we can answer some more questions as well. Thanks so much. I'm excited to see questions. So the first one was from...
Do you want me to keep the application on? Oh, you've taken it back.
I took it back, and I was trying to capture some of those questions that were coming in.
Yeah, I think we might want to go back in at some point, depending on the question. So we're going to wing it a little bit here. So Neve's question is, when will students be able to begin an application to receive an estimate of cost or award? So I think Roop did a really good job of caveating that we may develop, there's the potential that we might be able to do an estimate. So we're not there yet. So I can't answer the question as to when, but I hear the second part of it, which is that the idea of a, for lack of a better word, calculator is something that we have a business area have talked about for a long time, and it certainly is supported. But at this point in time, we don't have that on the table right now. So there's been some difference of opinion around that, and we'll have to work through. So I can't answer that question right now. I'm sorry. So then we had the conversation about BC Services card, and there was a little back and forth here about gender. And so we are waiting to get some final direction from the BC government gender data group around gender. And what we understand is gender is likely going to change from a binary to 3 options. That's what we expect to happen: male, female, and X. And of course, we will build our system to accommodate that once we get that final direction. And I believe that that is imminent. We're working with the research folks who will give us that final direction. So we'll be able to show you something more in line with the new approach to gender that will be coming. So then we moved into a question about displaying the social insurance number in a proper format. So we show it right now as 9 continuous digits. And the question here is, should it be shown in a more traditional format with the spacing? So that's certainly something we could do. That's certainly something that we might do. We'll have to think about that a little bit down the road. At this point, we've been focusing on some of those MVP concepts of let's just make sure we get the 9 digits in there and that they're valid. That would be something we might look to improve from a user experience perspective, so that the person can see it in a format that's more recognizable. So we could do that, and we'll see if we have time to do that at this point. So just following the thumbs up. More discussion about gender. It's a very interesting a new approach. So then, Stuart, I believe you were asking about a real-time check as it related to the CRA
Yes.
consent. Yeah. And so 2 things, and then I'll ask maybe Andrew Schwenker if you can provide us with something here. But just want to clarify that when we say real time, students are filling out their application, and it is our vision that students will fill out their application, but nothing happens until they submit. So we're not going to be doing anything until the student says, yes, I feel like I've answered all the questions, I've answered the required questions, and I've provided you with that information. And on submit is when things will start to happen. So when I say things, I mean things like if they have parents, we'll need to reach out. If they have a spouse, the CRA check, the credit check, those kinds of things won't happen until after submit. Whether or not, and maybe Andrew Schwenker, could you speak to what we're thinking, if we even know yet, whether or not this would be a real time or whether it's something that I believe currently it's a batch job that waits to a nightly?
Yeah, so we're looking at every job and trying to make it as quick as possible. CRA is one that we are limited on their side of things, but there are things we can do on our side to make it go faster for the student. And CRA is likely one of those that real time, if it's like a couple seconds, possibly not, but ideally like nothing is ever going to take a few days to go and check it. And this one in particular is like, we're hoping to hit like that 20-minute mark.
Great. Yeah, so that'll be something that we'll show in the future, but we haven't even submitted it yet. We're not quite there yet, but sounds like a real improvement. The next question is around stopping here. And again, I believe we were at the CRA check and save, calculate income, then return to complete. So I think this question, and Wendy, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this question speaks a little bit to that conversation that we've had about, well, what about people that are kind of fixing their application, seeing what happens, and then maybe answering in a different way? Is that what you're alluding to there, Wendy? We're not hearing you if you're answering my question. Something like that. Okay.
Sorry about that. Yeah,
That's okay.
it was something like that, but also just about the time it takes to do this application. And I'm imagining, I don't know, on a bus ride with a phone or something like that, needing to stop and return to it at a later time. So what I'm asking about is saving and returning.
Yeah, and there's, I think, and Courtney's question comes up the same thing. Can they save and come back to this? Yes, they can. So what you're saying is, I don't see the save button. So that's probably something that we need to get in there. But absolutely, it's our vision that student starts their application and they may fill it out in one sitting, or they may take 2 or 3 days. They may even take 2 or 3 months. But the idea is that they can save it, come back to it, enter and change that information as appropriate, and that they have the autonomy to do that until they hit submit. And then that would trigger a series of processes. And as I mentioned earlier, also that students will, even once they've submitted an application, if they go, oh no, my income was different, or my study period start date is totally changed now, they can go back into that application, edit that information, and that will trigger a reassessment. And they go in and they edit that information. They don't need to submit an Appendix 7 and us do something. They go in, change the information, and the system automatically starts them through that process and gets them through and starts the reassessment. So that's what we're looking at there. So I think we've covered off the save. Sorry, did someone have a follow-up question there?
I do, Elise. It's Wendy again.
Yeah.
When they're doing this application, is there any advantage to starting a couple of months ahead of time? And is there some kind of in-process number, or is the number generated when the submit happens?
Good question. Not yet. Something we could think about. So you're thinking that perhaps it's worth starting a saved application in June, because maybe that'll mean it gets processed before someone that started one in August. I don't think at this point we haven't built any of that yet, so don't know the answer to that question yet, but I don't anticipate that. There's a question about security. Is there an auto log off? Yeah.
It's Ron Warden. Just on the ability to have the student change or modify their information and data, are you setting up audit tables so that we can audit what has changed? Because this is a financial system. We're giving out money, and there's certain audit requirements that we have to deal with. I know this is the happy path, and we're assuming everything's going really nice, but on the bad path, we need to be able to have audit storage of what changes are being made by whom and when, so that we can would deal with it as a bad actor.
Yeah, so for sure. So far, we're not able to show you that now because we haven't got to that part in our story. Right now, Matt hasn't started a reassessment, but if and when we get there, we can certainly add that, and absolutely, we will definitely make sure that we are managing our records appropriately and are saving the information we need to save. At this point, Matt can edit his application however he wants and really has nothing to do with us until he presses submit. So that's the approach that we're taking, because if he wants to change things around, if he wants to change his study date, until he presses submit, we can hold the information there for him so that it's available for when he comes back. But we are not actioning anything until he submits, because that's when he says, okay, I'm declaring that everything here is true, everything's good to go. And before that, it's a draft and we are not getting involved. After that, and once we get a little further in our stories, then absolutely we'll start to talk about what do we need to audit and why and how do we save that. But we're not quite there yet, Ron.
Yep, I understand. Thank you.
Yep, thanks. So there was a question about auto log off, right? So if they, for security purposes. So we haven't done that yet, but absolutely, Terry, we definitely need to have a timeout mechanism so that we don't inadvertently allow it to be left up on screens. And I'm sure that David Malcolm and the security folks will help us to find what's the appropriate number for that. CRA consent language. Yep, probably, absolutely, David. And just again, remind folks that lots of things aren't done. So if it looks a little awkward, if we've got some spelling, which I'm sure we do, we'll get there, promise. And Courtney is promising to help us with all of that, and I know she will. So yeah, the CRA stuff. And again, we're not trying to boil the ocean here. So if that's the language that's in the current agreement, that's the language that we have. And unless we're going to start a project to change that, we'll probably use what we have, unless there's a really good reason. So we'll take a look at that for sure. Our considerations for screen readers and accessibility. So yeah, we absolutely have not yet applied any of those lenses, Myra, and it's a really good point. We need to make sure that all students, including students that might use Dragon Naturally Speaking or other assistive technology, have the ability to do that. And that's something that we'll do a little bit later on, and we haven't started yet, but you're right, we really need to do that. So that'll be something that probably comes a little bit closer to the end when we have more of the foundational stuff into play. Could someone please send me the current CRA? Okay, so we got some work going on. Mismatches between BC Services Card and SIN data is often a problem. Yep. Have we added anything thus far that might help? So we're talking about, and we're not that far along yet. So good question. I'm going to suggest we put that on hold until we get to the next part, but absolutely we are thinking about that. This is where once the student has completed their application, they now submit it and we have to do something. But I think, Terry, you're talking about BC Services Card student signs in and now they add their SIN number. But at that point, we're not doing any verification. We're not confirming that that is that student's SIN number. We are simply confirming that that is a valid SIN number. So we need to catch that a little bit later, and we catch that after the application has been submitted and before it's assessed. We're not quite there yet, so we will catch that as we get a little further. And
Elise,
please
I think Terry's.
Yeah.
Terry's. So what we deal. This is Toshi here.
Yeah.
I think what Terry's saying is that it happens at the login. So when they get their IDs verified, and now they're trying to log in into our system, and if their name, I think she's referring to social insurance number is always valid. It's always the name change that happens. It doesn't match with our data.
Okay. So are we talking about a process that's external to SABC and they need to go and deal with that with BC Services Card? Because we are now using BC Services Card name.
Right. So if they have previous
record
record and it doesn't match with the Service BC information, that's when they're not able to log in.
Right. And that's when we would say you need to go and deal with BC Service BC, because they are the ones that master our primary information for that student, and we take direction from them as to what your name is.
So would they need to provide us copies of their IDs to update our system?
No, because remember that when we demoed it, what happened is when Matt signed in, we actually reached out to BC Services Card and pulled the information that matched with his authenticated ID. Okay. So once they rectify it in the central registry with BC Services Card, it will be automatically reflected in our system.
Okay.
Yay, that means no work for you guys. Yeah.
There's a probability is that the conflict would be with the CRA or the SIN registry, actually not the service card in that case. So that's why we default to pushing them to go correct it. Again, remember that we're talking about new users here too. So we'll have other issues to deal with past users, but that's okay. So we have lots of ways that we're going to deal with that. So.
Yeah.
The most common mismatch with the SIN is usually where a person has changed their name for some reason. They've switched from using one parent's name to the other parent's name, or they have married or divorced, and they've changed the last name that they're using, but the SIN card never seems to get updated because there's no real demand for that. But when it comes to a student loan, if it doesn't match, then it creates a problem.
And the policy
it's
is actually if you change your name like that, you're supposed to contact ESTC and the SIN. You're supposed to contact the federal government to change it within the SIN registry, as well as go down to do it with ICBC for the BC side. So that's where we get the conflict coming.
Yes, but most uses of this, most uses of the SIN card don't actually demand it. They're not held up because it's not up to date. But in our case, it is.
Yeah.
So it sounds like there's two problems, and what we have done so far is solving one problem, but it has not solved the other problem, right? Which is the social insurance number name.
Yes.
And so we haven't quite gotten to that part of our journey yet, where we're validating the social insurance number against that name. And once we do, we need to solve that problem. And it's probably going to be, though, that, hey, you need to know that your social insurance number name does not match the number you've provided us. Therefore, your application is stopped, and you need to go and deal with that with social insurance. That's not us. We can't fix that. All we can do is tell you that it must be done. So we'll probably have to leave it at that, because our system isn't going to fix that problem for students. They have to make sure that their legal name and all of that information matches up with what's in our BC Services Card directory.
Yeah, I agree, Elise. The only way to change that is by changing the sequence of events and doing the SIN check match earlier. But without the consent, we really can't.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's just flag that, Michelle, if you could capture that one, because that's a problem that we want to see if we can help mitigate it. We may not be able to solve it, but we may be able to make a better experience for students and staff that are trying to help. The next question, and thank you for all these questions, guys. Really glad that you're asking. We've got lots of time to talk about it, and so keep them coming. Question related to the last sprint. In 2019, there was a decision note recommending the elimination of primary occupation policy. Yes, there was. So this is another area where I would flag that we have a mini project about application, and we've flagged that there may be some questions on the application that perhaps we don't need to ask anymore. So we'll make sure that we capture that in there. However, as it stands today, we have not made a decision to not ask that question, but I'm happy to follow up, and Phil, if you're on the phone, a heads up that that's going to come your way. Stuart saying yay. What if students want to cancel their application? Oh, what a great question, Magali. I am so excited. We haven't built it yet, but we are going to build a cancel. And that means that students will cancel their application. They won't have to call Tier 1, tell them to cancel, have a note added into the system, and then follow it up with an email to us, which we will then action. They will simply cancel their application. So we are going to get rid of that whole line of work for student support team and Tier 1. So it's not built yet, but there will be one in the future. And we'll make it pretty and big. Yes. I know. And I have to say, I feel like we need to call Rudy and tell him about that too, because I know that he was a director historically that was really trying to get that dealt with, but it was timing. So yeah, so we will work on that. Students could start applications for several PSIs. They need to be able to select what they return to. Yes, absolutely. Students may have multiple applications at one time. Some students apply semester by semester, some do a full year. We need to have flexibility. We haven't shown you that yet because we haven't built it yet. So you're right, we need to, when we get there, we will look forward to showing you that. If they want to cancel, so we've got that cancel. So it's going to be completely through this system. They will press a button, we'll make it big and red. and it'll all be done online, and it'll all be done through a self-service. So really great. So thanks, Sid, for comments. And this is where it gets tough, right? People are asking, you get excited and you wonder about what about this? What about this? We're showing you what we've built in the last 2 weeks. There's stuff we built in the 4 weeks before that, and there's stuff we haven't even touched yet. So appreciate the questions, but yeah, as much as possible, let's try to focus on this demo. But I know it's not that simple. And there's so many different things. So it's exciting to see the engagement. Kelly's sending me a note wondering how things are going, so we'll tell her it's awesome. Haven't looked at placeholders, so we're going to follow up on that CRA. Place name changes will be caught in submission. Yeah, I think we've captured that. Well, obviously we're going to add more information, better questions. We're going to make it look prettier, all of that. We're not there yet. Obviously it's not done, but so lots of thank yous, good news. I think we're at the end of questions. Were there any other questions though that folks didn't get a chance to write or you'd like to talk through instead? And again, try to remember this is about this chunk of work. And hopefully, you know, but if you're worried about something, you can always give me a call or. Oh, there's one more, Stuart. I don't know about you guys, but I find like the little screen pops up behind what everyone else has said, so then you can't read it. I don't know. For schools and programs, will we seek information from private? So yeah, the idea is that in a future state, like we do now, we gather every year information from publics and privates to populate the program listing, either through the program eligibility declaration or institutional appendix. So we gather information so that students can select the programs and the start dates and get provided with educational costs and other kinds of things. So we're definitely looking forward to a place where, as much as possible, all institutions will be able to provide information about their programs, make sure that we have validated them and that they're valid programs, pardon me, eligible programs. And then have that available to students. But of course, we need to have an exception process as well, is that if the program the student is looking for is not on the list, we also need to have a process. I'm not going to call it an Appendix 3, but a process similar to that, which allows us to gather program information and then put it on a list so that other students can select it and we don't need to go through that again.
James has a question there, Elise, that got missed, I think.
Oh, okay, thanks, sorry. James, the question about filling out an application before program year. So we have no plan to change the idea that program year, if you want to apply within a given program year, we have a bit of a start date as far as when those policies become available. So I don't think there's any plan to change that. I can tell you that one of the projects, however, that we are looking at is allowing students with a permanent disability to perhaps be assessed for that disability status, or I shouldn't say assessed, verified. Verify for that status outside of the application process, but I'm not aware that we have any plan to change the application availability date.
I was thinking, oh no, not the availability date, obviously, but I was thinking more at that last window before they click submit, it will say you may be eligible for. I was just curious if a practice might come with students where they just go in, fill out the app early to see what they might, you know. I'm curious how that functionality may be used or leveraged down the road.
Yeah, maybe down the road, but not for the MVP. We're going to just build the basics. What you are going to see in future iterations, so this isn't related to Matt. Matt isn't a former youth in care, but for example, Jessica is one of our personas. And when we start to use Jessica was a former youth in care. So what you're also going to see are some cool things where perhaps we have a pop-up that says, hey, Jessica, you indicated that you're a former youth in care. We have some other programs that you might be eligible for. Would you also like to apply for the tuition waiver program? Would you also like to apply for youth? So just some other things so that we start to use that application and use how they're answering that questions to help make programs more available and increase awareness. So we'll do that. And I can see perhaps if there was a fundamental change down the road, much further down the road, where we're going to be making a big change to our policy and it's beneficial to maybe wait, perhaps we might do that, but that's definitely not in the MVP. So lots of positives from folks. Hey, Andre. It's so nice to see your name. I have not worked with you in forever. This is so weird, hey, compared to where we were 2 years ago. Pretty exciting. So I feel like we've kind of hit most of the ends of the questions as it relates to us showing you Matt filling out the program information, which again, very, very small right now, just a placeholder, but more importantly, the financial information and the bonus that Sandeep talked about, which is the log off. So I want to talk to you, if I can, a little bit about what's next. So
actually, Elise, if you don't mind, we kind of jumped ahead there with the questions for enthusiasm. I'm going to take that forward into our agenda next time. But there's been some technical things that's happened in this last sprint that Andrew Schwenker wanted to update the group on. Some people might have questions. Some technical people might have questions on that. So I thought I'd pass the mic to him before we get into what's next, if that's okay. You ready, Schwenker?
Hey, yes, I am. So the first one there, I'll go to Commanda. Commanda is the rules engines that we're likely to be doing, which is primarily to handle the assessment piece of it. We didn't quite finish getting it set up for this sprint, so we're going to keep going on that. The ATBC there, we did touch on it briefly, but we are looking at speeding up how they get information from us and how we get information from them, and making the just the experience, especially systems wise, a lot easier for both sides, particularly mostly to help the student get done what they're trying to do with us faster. So not waiting to do certain things or getting like their name and contact and any information ATBC is needing from us faster and easier. The shield there was just sort of a reminder that we've done some sort of code stabilization and consistency fixes, and that's something we're doing all the time. So if we notice that we need to change a little bit, or we like this way of doing things, like we're going to be proactively upkeeping everything we've built, so we don't have to then go back and redo a whole bunch of stuff. And we did start as well building some automated testing for some different pieces, particularly right now some of the API authentication that happens. We haven't built that into our pipeline yet, and when I say pipeline, I'm meaning basically how the application is deployed to different environments. That will become automated upcoming, but it hasn't been automated yet. But the big one there that we managed to do this sprint is we figured out basically a way to look up past students' information. And what I mean by that is if they have applied for permanent disability, for example, that's the big one we were looking at this time, because Matt is, he does have a PD status. He's a first-time applicant, so it would be, of course, not found for us. But what we've done is we took, with the help of the data folks, a copy of what they currently collect from SFAS and different systems, and basically did some sort of back-end code type stuff, but basically did a database transformation and put it into our OpenShift project, which is basically just our project scope. There isn't any data in there. It's just basically some tables and stuff and some identification of a person. And what we've done is that if we basically have an individual in that second database, what we do is when they complete their profile initially, we'll do a lookup into that to see if they've already been permanently disabled with us. And then we'll save it onto their current sort of live database. So we don't have a UI component yet, so I can give a quick demo, but there isn't a UI. There's no permanent disability status or anything on the screen, so it's kind of hard to see, but I can give a quick little thing of how this works. Just give me 1 second here.
Andrew, can I just reframe what you've said and make sure
Yes,
that we
please.
understand it? Sometimes Andrew talks tech and it's my job to describe
Decode.
it. So, yeah. So unlike, I think most people think of the system as, okay, we're going to have a new system. And on day one, all of the information that's in SFAS is going to be put into the system. That is not going to happen. I'm going to stop there for effect. That is not going to happen. Our system is not going to be pre-populated with all of the SFAS data. What's going to happen is that SFAS data is going to go into this repository or this other little place, and we are going to call out to that system to pull the data that we need when we need it. Because otherwise we end up with a whole bunch of data from 40 years ago that we don't need. And it also means we have to check it, make sure it's good quality, all of that. So that's a really different approach. I have to admit, it took me a while to get my head around it, but I'm super excited about it. So what Andrew's talking about here is that we're going to have all of that SFAS data in a different system. We're going to make sure that it's available, because I know that some folks are going to need to use it on day one because someone's going to be calling. And you need to provide support. So we're going to make sure that you can use it and use it in a fairly simple way, but we're not going to pre-populate everything. And we will, again, that's not right now. We're going to talk about it more in the future, but just so you know. But in order to get ready for that, Andrew and the team need to start building that stuff behind the scenes so that we can decide when we need to ask the system, hey, has this person been previously assessed for PD? Hey, has this person had money in the past? All of those questions, which are absolutely going to come up, we need to make sure that that system is there and that we can access it. Is that accurate, Andrew? Did I flag that?
Yeah, pretty much spot on there, actually.
Okay.
I just have to leave and rejoin because my Teams is being a classic Teams for me. So just give me 1 second.
No worries. So why don't I maybe talk a little bit about what's coming next while Andrew reboots. I'm sure we've all been there.
Okay.
So
He's back.
Oh wow, are you ever fast? My system doesn't reboot that quickly. Oh my god.
Oh, that wasn't a restart.
Oh, okay.
Did some tech stuff. It's okay. So again, this is just disclaimer here that it was a proof of concept to see what we can do. The data might not be absolutely perfect. The individual might not be perfect. It might not be full and complete, but it is a lookup into what would be a solid representation of that person in the previous system and signing in. So I'm hoping my connection didn't time out here, but basically what I'm going to do is I have already populated one of our test accounts in the other system that we've uploaded. Sorry, I'm trying to use terminology here that everyone can understand, just because there isn't a UI stuff, so it's not going to be the easiest to demonstrate. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to sign in here with the user. This user does not exist in our system. And by our system, I mean the newer one. So let me just grab the card number. I hope it was this person. And put a password in. Of course, everybody's seen all this before. Social insurance number. This part really matters. One, 2, 3 Freepik Street. Okay, Canada. So what's going to happen here, when I hit save for this person, we are going to do a lookup just in that representation of past students and see if they exist. And right now we're looking specifically for a permanent disability status for this individual that we previously had on record. So when I hit save, you'll see they've logged in. You can go to your profile. Since there is no UI thing here, this is where it's going to be, sorry, it's not going to make much sense. But effectively, this is the representation of like our data and the actual database. And you'll see here that there is a PD verified of true for Emily, who I just logged in as. And I won't go too much down this road because it's very hard to interpret and understand. But that is the gist of it. So we basically did a lookup into another data set and see if they had a permanent disability status. In this case, they did, and we saved it. So if we had like a UI component that said permanent disability status, we could then show it based off of.
Show the check mark or.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
And that is about it. So what we're actually going to be using it for in the future, a lot of that is still in the works. Any, basically all the stories and all the requirements of what we're going to be using it for is still in the works. So it's not, we don't know everything obviously yet, but we have found a way.
Awesome,
Bill
thank
Frias
you.
has a question, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, hi. Just this, I guess this is future because you said you're going to be looking at what you're going to apply this to. But say, for instance, the business decides that we're going to look at marital status and it pulls marital status for that specific person from this data collection that you got from repository. Thank you very much. But if the marital status has changed, do they have the option of changing that type of thing? Like, chances are PD is not going to be not going to change, but if it's something like marital status or something that could very easily be changed through a course of someone's life, can they change that?
Yeah, so that's
after it pulls.
I can feel this one if you like, Elise. But basically, because we haven't got to that requirement yet, we don't know exactly what we want to use from this old system. Maybe marital status is one that we just ask fresh. Maybe it's not. Maybe we do look it up and allow them to change it. We have a lot of options, especially knowing that we can use it. We can do certain things for sure.
Yeah, and I think this is a good example where I'm going to be a bit crass. All of you are shocked because it's me. Where the technical folks are going, wow, that's really interesting. The business folks are starting to go a little cross-eyed because as long as it works, right? Or at least that's how I feel about some of this stuff. So yeah, we're going to show you some more, but I think it's a good idea to start to think about that concept that we're not going to have a system that's chock-blocked full with all that old data. We're going to build some new information and we're going to access when it's appropriate, which we'll show you as we continue to build. We're going to access some of that historical information and pull it in when we need to. We can't show you that today because it's not in scope for what we've been working on right now, but it's going to come pretty quick because PD status is a really good example of where we don't want the student experience to be where they have to go through that process again if they have already had their status verified. So we will make sure that we pull that information. So we'll show that to you when we get to building that, and it's not going to be in Sprint 4. Sorry. Sprint 4 is going to go in a slightly different direction.
And one thing there that I should mention, sorry, that I forgot to mention, is when Sandeep was doing his demo there with Matt, our previous persona, him being a new applicant, he didn't, and you did see that he was a new applicant with a permanent disability status. When Sandeep clicks a profile there, it did the lookup. But because Matt didn't exist in our system, he wasn't found.
There we go. Cool. I didn't know that. I just learned something. Thank you. Didn't realize that we had that. That's awesome. Phil, do you have a follow-up question or?
Yeah, it was, I guess, because I was asking specifically to what we were looking at, I guess where my mind went was the institution profiles and institution when they start doing that and the data that it pulls from the repository. Like,
yeah,
it works differently. Yeah, so
we'll work differently and we can talk a little bit more. We're talking specifically SFAS right now and student data, but we do have a different approach that we want to use for institutions.
Okay.
So let's talk about that another time. I'm conscious of the time, and I would like to tell you a little bit about what we're going to move into for Sprint 4, and also want to save some of these secrets for the next Sprint demo, right? Because we can't tell you everything right now. We can try to focus in a little bit more on what we've done during that 2 weeks and then what's coming or what's immediately past. So maybe, Michelle, if you could show the Sprint 4 scope. Sprint 4, which starts tomorrow and runs for the next 2 weeks, and we look forward to demoing to you in 2 weeks today, is going to take us in a different direction. We're going to leave Matt for a little bit, and we're actually going to start working with a different persona, and we're going to start working from an institution perspective. So we're going to start working with Zoe, who is an admin assistant at a currently non-designated private BC institution. And she works with her supervisor. And so we're going to start working on the stories where an institution user signs in and an institution user starts setting up their account. Institution users are different than students. They do not sign in using a BC Services card. They will be signing in using a business BCE ID. That was a business decision that we made about 2 years ago, that we would be moving all of our existing users over to a business BCE ID. And so I know there's some work to be done for the existing users that are currently using a basic BCE ID, but we will be migrating them over or supporting them to migrate over to a business BCE ID. And new users have a business BCE ID and they start to set up their account. And we're going to start to get to a place where we're hoping by the end of the next 2 weeks, we'll be able to show you the business user signing in, creating an account, adding information to the institution account, and remembering this is a new institution. This is not an existing institution. This is a brand new institution. And then, of course, logging off. And then we'll show you that they can log back in, and now that account exists for the institution. This is not going any further than that. We haven't validated that institution. We haven't decided if they're going to be designated or any of that, but this is functionality that's currently being used in the CRM. So we built this 2 years ago, and because of some decisions that we've made, we need to move this into our new system. So we're going to do that from a technical perspective. Behind the scenes, the technical team still has some work to do. We know we need to start thinking about that, do more work on that data repository, getting that ready. They need to do some more work on that rules engine, because sooner or later, we're going to take Matt's application and we're going to assess it. So they need to get some of that stuff ready to go. And we're going to continue to do some work with @BC so that we can make sure that Matt, who in a future sprint, not Sprint 4, but in a future sprint, Matt's going to be able to be verified for PD status. And of course, Roop and Courtney and Lynn are continuing to work on all kinds of workflows and what they call wireframes, or those samples of different things. Plus, we also need to think about what does the institution dashboard look like? So that's that institution account. So we're going to start working on institutions. So when we come back together in 2 weeks, particularly Phil and your team are probably going to be quite interested in this. And we will be working with Zoe, who's going to be signing in, creating a new account. And you'll notice that that is intentionally different. We had to move away from that approach initially 2 years ago, whereas the institution would fill out the designation application, and then the institutions and program team had to essentially re-enter that, data enter that information into the system. We're hoping to move away from that and take away that data entry from you and give it back to the institution, because that fits with our self-service. And then at what point do we get you as a team to validate and do those kinds of work? So lots more discussions to come. That's what we're going to start to work on. Yay, Phil gave us the thumbs up. That's good. Anything that takes work away is a good thing, right? And then we can spend time doing other things with institutions and stuff. So So that's where we're at today. Are there any final questions before we wrap things up? Lots of really good discussion, lots of things to think about. I'm just going back to the chat log.
Anything on what's coming next?
Yeah. And Jamie, you're going to follow up with David about the questions around sending personal information and stuff. So we'll just
in the repository. Yep.
Yeah. Great.
I don't remember if we said it at the beginning. Did we show that there's the link to the GitHub repo?
Thanks for the reminder. So, as always, a reminder that we are trying to be, at least, very transparent with all the work that's going on. So you have full-time access to our product review board. In here is how to connect with us. That takes us to Adrian Steele right now, and she'll filter it to the right person, likely Elise or myself. GitHub repo. So this is for those people interested in looking at all the techie code stuff. I don't recommend the business folks go there. You'll be very confused. But you might be interested, business folks, in checking out our Zen board. This is our backlog, and you'll see live action of us moving things to done and closed, and what's coming next. If you're interested, you'll have a view-only version of that to look at.
Yeah, and I think I just want to flag that Roop has kind of put out a bit of a call to action in the chat, which is great. Just really welcome your feedback. So if you get a chance to tell us, you know, how did that product demo go? What can we do more of, less of, differently? Any feedback would be really welcomed. So we can improve the experience for you for 2 weeks from now and going forward. So feel free. We can take the good, the bad, and the ugly.
And if you think of it at 3 a.m., feel free to email us.
Absolutely. Yep, absolutely. You can also add little stickies to this mural board. If you're in the mural board later or wanted to look at something, you can add a comment. So yeah, that's great too. So thank you everybody for your time. Really appreciate it.
Awesome. You get 35 minutes back.
Maybe 5 because it was only scheduled till 11.
Oh, shoot.
Yeah, 5. It sounded good, but 5 is what
I thought we were
got.
scheduled till noon. Okay, 5 minutes. You're welcome.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah.